Can y'all hear me? Y'all know what this is? This was my first Al-Anon book, One Day at a Time. They told me I got this, and back then they gave them to you. You didn't have to buy them. But it was the first one I was given. And later on I was told an ODAT book that's fallen apart belongs to somebody who isn't. I buy one at the beginning of every decade. So I now have I have four. I'll be getting a fifth one in a few years. Anyway, my name is Kathy Lyons. I am from, ironically, Henry County, Kentucky. And I drove all the way to Georgia to talk in Henry County. No, it's the first leg of my 2-week vacation, which I haven't had one since 2004. So I love beginning it with all of you. I told them at the table when we were eating tonight that it felt like I had just walked into one of our eating meetings and I was home. One thing I will say right off the bat, it's the only place in my entire life, having come up the way I did, that I felt at home with people. I see a lot of heads shaking, so you know what I'm talking about. Usually in Al-Anon we do a lot like AA. We tell what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I can sum that up probably in 3 sentences. I was born into an alcoholic family. My dad was a chronic alcoholic. I married an active drinking alcoholic. And I have 2 children of my 5 recovering from alcoholism and drug addiction. So for most of you that are in Al-Anon, you already know what happened. I tried to fix everybody, and it started very early in my life. At the age of 4, I used to sit out on the swing at night and wait for my dad to come home with my mother. Now, of course, at the age of 4, I didn't know why, I knew we were waiting for Dad to come home because when his headlights would come down the street and he'd see us sitting on the porch, he'd turn and not come home. And she'd say, well, let's go to bed. He's not going to come home. So I learned really early some of the tricks of waiting on an alcoholic to come home. And as the years went by and I watched what happened in my family, I picked up other traits. But all along the while, I kept questioning things as I got older. I really didn't care that my dad drank, as long as it didn't bother my life. And I told my mom that. As long as he doesn't embarrass me in front of my friends, he doesn't show up at something drunk, I don't care. So I started at a very early age, not really understanding what was going on, because she was angry all the time. Neither one of them ever found a program of recovery. And matter of fact, when my dad had his stroke, my mother thought he was drunk, so he didn't get help right away. The things that Al-Anon has given me is what I really would rather spend talking about. And a lot of Al-Anoners will finish their talk with this poem. Guess what? I'm going to start mine with it. You've all heard it probably several times. It's called The Weaving. It says, life is but a weaving. Wait a minute, I got to put my eyeballs on. My life is but a weaving between my God and me. I cannot choose the colors, but he worketh steadily. Oft times in sorrow, and sometimes foolish pride, I forget he sees the top, and I the underside. Not till the loom is silent, and the shuttle ceases to fly, will God explain the reasons, or unroll the canvas, and explain the reasons why. It's the most important part of this poem. But the dark threads are as needed in the skillful weaver's hands as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern that God has planned. Now, I didn't know right away coming in, and I didn't really even work this program the first 10 and a half years for myself. I was what was known as an AA escort. You that are laughing must have been AA escorts. We made sure they got to the meetings. We made sure that they had their big book. Matter of fact, in the beginning, I used to lay all of my books out in case he wanted to read one of the pages. But he usually just pitched it out the back door. But anyway, for us that live with any type of addiction, there is a deep-seated love and concern for the individual, even though we may not understand the disease. We know they're destroying their lives. We know it's affecting ours, and we're worried about our kids. And so we do what we think is the right thing to do. We try to fix it. We go to great lengths to try to fix it. I remember hearing some of the older speakers when I first came into the program. Arbitruse O'Neill was probably on the first councils of Al-Anon and when they formed themselves. And I heard her speak one time, and it seemed like they understood better than the next several generations that this was a disease, that these people were not doing this intentionally. But over a period of time, many of us began to believe that it was a personal vendetta against us. And we internalized that with things like, if I was prettier, maybe he wouldn't drink. Or if I had a better job. Or if I paid more attention to him than the children. And the list can go on and on and on. And so we went back and tried to do those things to try to fix his problem, her problem, whatever the case might be. So like I said, I went for a good 10 and a half years in the program of Al-Anon, and I went to a lot of speaker meetings for AA and open discussion meetings. The very first meeting that I ever went to find out how to get him to stop drinking. Anybody else do that? Did you go to the first meeting, figure out how to get him to stop drinking? Did you? No. It was interesting, though. I told a few friends what I was going to do. So when I got there, they made the mistake of saying, "Would you like to share?" And I monopolized the entire hour, raking him over the coals, letting them know what terrible things he had been doing and was still doing. And the funny thing about it was they let me. And I literally talked the entire hour. And when I finished, one lady did say, "We're going to have to close here pretty soon." So I finished. So I did finish. And they just looked at me and said, "Keep coming back." Well, I got home, I called my friend, she said, "How'd that Al-Anon meeting go?" And I said, "Shoot, I could have sat on the phone and done the same thing with you." I said, "Didn't get a thing out of it." But I had a stubborn streak a mile wide, and I figured if there was any answers to be had, I needed to keep going back. So it has become my mantra to say to everybody, keep coming back. Whether I talk to them one-on-one or in a group like this or in a regular meeting, I always encourage everyone to keep coming back. Because the meeting you miss may be the miracle that will happen. Maybe the one meeting at which your miracle will happen. You're looking at a miracle right now. By all accounts of my past, I shouldn't even be here. I was married straight out of high school and had 2 little girls by the time I was 19 years old. And he took a job that put us on the road, and we lived in 7 states in 3.5 years. We were not in the military. Everybody thinks that, but we were not. But he operated heavy machinery that cleaned up train derailments. So every time the machinery had to go to a new location, the crew and the trucks and the heavy equipment went, and the families followed later. So I picked those 2 little girls up 7 times in 3.5 years and moved them to different homes, different schools, different doctors. And then one day he came home and said, "I don't want to be married to you anymore." And I was in London, Ohio at the time, and I'd been raised in Illinois and had no family there. And on top of everything else, I thought, I'll show him. He had left me for another woman, straight up. So I'll just date one of his co-workers. And that's how I met my second husband, and he was actively drinking, and I didn't care. It was sort of like I didn't care when my dad drank. But later on, I would care a lot. Because when I would threaten to leave him, he knew it was a threat up until this one time. And I said, I'm taking my girls and I'm going back to my home state. And he said those 3 little words that every good codependent needs to hear. I need you. And I stayed. He and I were married for 12 and a half years. And in those early years, because I was divorced, my 2 little girls from the first marriage would go. We'd either fly them or we'd drive, meet halfway, and spend time with their dad. And when they were gone, I pulled some of the most horrific stunts, stone sober, trying to get him to stop drinking. First thought was, well, I'll just go out and I'll drink and stay out later than he does. I'll show him. We moved from one house to another house, and I went to that empty house because I still had the key and spent the night there, and he still never came looking for me or even knew I didn't come home that night. You would have thought by then something would have clicked, but it didn't. And it's hard sometimes for me to explain. I don't ever want to offend anybody, but the bottom line is this disease will turn a family member into someone they do not recognize nor want to be. Now, how that exactly happens, it's over a period of time. There's a lot of decisions we make that are bad, maybe. But I learned here around these tables there are no good or bad decisions, they're just decisions. So you make one, you learn from it, you make a new one. And that was the process for me over a period of years. I'm not proud of a lot of the things that I did. Like, I went to some real hole-in-the-wall drinking places and would play card games, shoot craps, anything, and drink to just try to outdo him. The insanity of it is he's not there, he's not seeing it, so, what effect is it going to have on him? Unless I was doing this in front of him, but that's how insane I was. After I realized what a losing battle I was in, a lot of stuff came up. And most of it was from my childhood, that somehow I was never good enough. I wasn't good enough to stay married to. I wasn't good enough to find someone that would love me for who I am and be faithful and all this other stuff. And most of all, I convinced myself, I did this to myself. This is that insanity. I did this to myself. I convinced myself that I was a mistake, that I should never have been born. And in that insanity and during that dark time in my life, I'm now married to an active drinking alcoholic, and we have one baby that he did not show up for her birth, nor did he show up for her first birthday. And I am now pregnant with our second child. And I'm down in the basement when that baby's taking a nap, contemplating suicide. Pregnant. Not proud. And I only share that because I want you to see for some, and this is my story, it's not your story, it's my story. That's how sick I got. I have a life growing in me, and I'm contemplating ending not just my life, didn't even think about it. And I really believe in prayer. And I knew that there were people around me that knew how sick I was, knew how bad things were getting, and had to have been praying for me. Because I woke up the next day and the light bulb came on. I went, wait a minute, I can't kill myself, I'm pregnant. Okay, but I am a hazard to everybody that walks into my life. So these kids would be better off without me. So when this baby gets born, I'm going to figure out a way to disappear. Again, not thinking about the trauma that it would set out and put into these kids' heads, or my siblings, my parents, anything. Just had convinced myself I was not worthy to interact with anybody that I loved, because I was destroying things, destroying relationships, destroying trust. And yes, during this period of time, one of my two older girls, this was another kind of like nail in the coffin. It was bad enough that their dad didn't want to be married to me, but at one point, the second oldest daughter didn't want to live with me anymore either. She wanted to go live with her dad. So it was just one more piece of evidence that said, I'm not any good. I'm not any good as a wife. I'm not any good as a mother. I'm not any good as a person. I tell this because I hope no one goes to that level in this family disease. After I came out of that, I got to talking about it a little bit. I didn't tell the whole truth at meetings, but I talked about it enough that some of the people in my Al-Anon group started giving me additional material to read. They gave me a book called Codependent No More. Now you have to understand that not only was my father an alcoholic, but he was also mentally ill. So I was raised as a young child going to the psych ward and in and out of state hospitals while Mom would visit him. So on top of all this other junk that I had convinced myself about, I also figured I inherited his insanity. But again, like I said, I believe in prayer. Somebody was looking out for me. And I got that book and I read it, and that was my first spiritual awakening experience. I finished the book. I'd never read a book from the first page to the last page, ever. Not in high school, ever. And I couldn't put that puppy down. And when I did, I took it back to the lady that owned it, and I said, thank you. I said, I'm not sure what all of that meant in there, but I know one thing after reading this book. I am not insane. I am not crazy. I am suffering from codependency, from having grown up in an alcoholic home, having married and nurtured an alcoholic home. And that was one of the turning points. I got into getting a sponsor. I got into working the steps. And it was a good thing because within a short period of time of that experience, my second husband also left me. I was on thin ice, but at least I was still above the ice. And a lot of people around tables like here tonight helped me get off that slippery slope. They supported me when I couldn't support myself. And our friend that Nick was talking about used to say at meetings all the time, let us love you till you can love yourself. So I did. And I went to a lot of meetings and listened for the first time in a long time instead of talking. Remember that first meeting? That didn't end real soon. Kept right on doing it. But anyway, took the cotton out of my ears, put it in my mouth, kept quiet, and listened. That marriage ended, and we had 3 children. We were already back in Kentucky. He and I, the second husband and I, did live in 4 different states with that same. Remember, I told you I was going to go date one of his co-workers? So I did. And we moved to 4 different states while with that train wrecking heavy equipment crew, and then back to Kentucky to farm. Our third child was born in Kentucky. So I have 2 born in Illinois, 2 born in Kansas, and 1 in Kentucky. I got 1 homegrown Kentuckian. The first 5, probably 10 years of that divorce was hard in the sense that any divorce would be hard when you have children. But I stayed close to my program. I stayed close to my program people. I got more involved with my church. When you're raising youngins as a single parent and switching off and on every other weekend and vacations and things with their daddy, you learn to adjust. And I remember by the time the oldest, my youngest daughter, the two older ones by then had left home and were living in Ohio, but the oldest daughter of that last marriage, I remember one time boo-hooing to her about that we just didn't have any kind of family anymore. And here she is and all that child wisdom. She was probably 12 or 13 years old. She goes, yes, we do, Mama. She said, we got a family. We're a family. We're just different. Our family's different. And I thought, well, that's a good way to look at it. So I quit moaning and groaning about that. My children actually had paid more attention to their dad and I being in recovery and listening to us on the phone than we gave them credit for. They never went to Al-Anon, but they're well-adjusted kids. What it's like now. I could go on with stories that may or may not be like yours, but I'd really like to spend some time talking about what it's like now. What it's like now. This program has taught me to live one day at a time. I had to start by living 5 minutes at a time, which was long. I had a sponsor say, just clear your mind. Look at your watch and then just clear your mind. "30 seconds it went by." I can't, the first thing I thought of was, I can't do this. I can't do this. Then I had somebody tell me, why don't you take can't out of your vocabulary? Just work on that, just that one thing. Take can't out of your vocabulary. When you get ready to say I can't, say I will or I am. So I did that. Next word I took out of my vocabulary was should. Boy, look at the heads bounce now. We should ourselves to death, don't we? Took should, replaced it with could. Took the word but. It was always, I know, but. He did this or not. I know, but. No. Say, however. I know he did this. However, I'm not pleased with it. Keep it simple. Everything you offered, I picked up and started using. Everything. Because I knew my life depended on it. And I knew that if I was ever going, what was probably my second epiphany or spiritual awakening was when I realized I am his creation. Therefore, I am enough. You didn't create me. My spouses didn't create me. My job doesn't define me. My Creator created me. Therefore, I'm supposed to be here because he doesn't make mistakes. Those two things have been very pivotal in my recovery. I had another one where I woke up and, I don't know, in the Christian community, they probably say it's the Holy Spirit coming on me. I don't know what it was, but I woke up one morning and I literally could feel from the top of I stood up out of bed and I had this feeling rush from my head to my toes. Called my sponsor, who was married to, who at the time, and ran, and I got to talk to you. She says, what's going on? I said, I got to talk to you. Okay, come on out here. I said, you're never going to believe this. She said, what's that? And I said, I woke up this morning and realized something. I am tired of surviving, and I am no longer going to cope. I am going to live, and I'm going to live fully. And that was the beginning of the rest of my life. So here's what it's like today. Somebody motioned to me when I'm supposed to shut up. Now, that's your job, Nick. But this is what it's like today. I have a blended family. My first husband and his wife, and I, and our 2 grown daughters. He has a grown son with her. He has 3 grandchildren only. I have 8. We get along fine. I usually go up to Ohio and spend Easter with that family. And that's all because of the recovery that I've gained here. The resentments are gone, the forgiveness has been given. The past is in the past. We've learned from it. We've grown from it. We've become more close to being the creation we were meant to be. My second husband and I have been working for our son's construction company since 2009. I see him every day. We get along fine. He recently married his fourth wife. He has a son by his third wife. He has stepchildren with his second wife, and our children. So we have a huge blended family in Kentucky. We get together at Christmas. Everybody, the Ohio girls come down. Our children get together. His son, which Henry is, what name? But anyway, his son is the same age as our oldest grandson. So his son's just been another grandchild to me. I've diapered him. I've babysat him. I've fed him. So we have Christmas together. Every year we have a week on Lake Cumberland on a houseboat trip. Everybody goes. Everybody has fun. Everybody gets along. That's in itself, where I came from, where I was at, a miracle. Not everyone understands our family, but not everyone has a program of recovery. Now, all of my children except one are married, so we've brought in more people. Whoops, sorry, talk with my hands. We brought in more people, and with more people in a family blend, you have more possibilities of alcohol and drug addiction scenarios to deal with. And so we share our experience, strength, and hope with our children. I especially carry a message, whichever the Spirit moves me to carry, like tonight, and I leave the results in God's hands. I literally let go and let God. My oldest daughter just celebrated 32 years of being clean and sober this past January. My son, I think, has 12 years. But we now have teenage grandchildren, and we're getting ready for the next cycle. But this program has made it possible for us to carry a message, to stand firm in our decisions, whatever they might be, and leave the results in God's hands. And the way I have done that myself personally is back when my oldest daughter was in her cocaine, alcohol addiction, there was a 2.5, maybe 3-year period that I did not know where she was at, because I had made the decision to put her out, change the locks on the doors. She knew that if she stayed clean and sober, and she needed a place to stay for the night, the couch was always available. But if she chose to drink and drug, she was not to come. I prayed every day and asked God to take her and to care for her, and I used to add this little directive for him. If you could do this without her having to go through all the stuff I went through, or that her stepdad went through, I greatly appreciate it. But if not, just get her to the other side alive. And he did. I always thought I would get a phone call that, she'd either died, killed somebody, or had been arrested. All the horrible things we think of that goes on. And one day I did get a phone call from her dad in Ohio saying that they had convinced her to go to a treatment facility. They kicked her out. I don't know very many that will do that, but they did. And within 24 hours, she was on the corner with her dealer, off and running again. But by the grace of God and handing her over every morning, the miracle happened. She had a friend, took her to an AA meeting, met her sponsor that she didn't know at the time, but met the lady that was going to be her sponsor. And so now she has I think it was 32 years on January 23rd, and went on and finished her bachelor's degree in criminology and her master's in psychology, and she is a chemical dependency counselor and therapist. The lady that took her to her first meeting, we were privileged to sit with her and be her hospice care last year, and that was very meaningful for both of us to be able to do that. We took turns. Her friend lived in Frankfort, Kentucky, so my daughter drove all the way from Columbus, Ohio every Wednesday night and stayed with her till Monday morning. She worked from home, so it worked out for her to be able to do that. And in the evenings, after my daughter was gone, and the daycare, the neighbors that came in and cared for her during the day, and then I would go down and stay with her at night until she got COVID on top of everything else. So you never know what the dark threads are going to look like, but they definitely do make the gold and silver ones much more meaningful. I said earlier you're looking at a miracle, and I want to close with this. This program gave me the ability to live one day at a time, so that when in 2016, and I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, I was able to deal with it one day at a time. And of course we had the surgery and the chemotherapy. And then we, as all cancer patients know, you track it. You know, you get the blood work, you get the scans. So in 2018 it metastasized to my lungs. So we went through the radiation and the chemo again, and right before COVID broke out in 2020, there was one more little cell, one more little tumor in my left lung. So we went and shot it up with radiation, and since then I've had no active activity from the cancer since. However, in 2021, I did get COVID, and I caused so hard I broke 4 ribs and punctured a lung, ended up in the hospital for 12 days and on a chest tube for 23. God's not done with me for some reason. But I'm very grateful to be able to have lived through the things that I've lived through, experienced the things that I've experienced, because all of it, all the jobs I've had, I've worked with released offenders, I've worked with Child Protective Services. They gave me all the domestic violence and drug cases. And I know some people would think, oh wow, no. It helped me to understand that everything I've experienced has been for a purpose, and it's not for me to hold on to. Everything I've shared tonight, as far as recovery is concerned, has been given to me by others in recovery, and my job is to pass it on. And for that reason, I want to thank Nick for asking me to come down and speak. I hope that I'll always be able to, for a few more years anyway, to carry a message. You take from it what you like, you leave the rest, and may God bless your recovery. Thank you.